Hello, today we're here with poet Clair Bateman, who's going to read and discuss her poem For Sign and Breath. Welcome, Claire.
Hi, thank you, Philip.
Okay, so would you read your poem for us, Claire?
Sure. It's called Mystique Academy, and um, I'm really grateful to be included in this project. It's a wonderful project. Mystique Academy. The first thing they taught us is that hair isn't dead. An exotic state of matter, it's composed primarily of discontinuities, retracting at an average rate of a quarter inch a month. We learned that a child may become tearful or agitated on the occasion of her first hair lengthening and how to distract her. We learn to identify and respond to the singular tone each follicle emits as we chanted out the strands. We committed to memory the esoteric names of the various knots, tangles, and convolutions we'd encounter. We were examined on the circumstances under which the separate emptiness of those knots' vital cores might, without our intervention, first stellify and then opacify into spinning inversions. We were tested in dim rooms and assessed in harrowing glare. We were questioned underwater and evaluated in our sleep. And don't we now tremble at our stations, wielding the sacred torches on behalf of those whose hair is finally long enough for apotheosis? There's nothing more paradoxical than our work. Red burns slowest, then blonde, then brown, but black goes up in a flash as though darkness excites the flame.
Wow, what a strange and wonderful exploration
Thank
of
you.
hair, which is, of course, has special meaning for me. But tell us why you chose that particular poem, Claire, for
Um,
this project.
well, I've been interested, I've spent most of my writing life kind of writing from the lyric eye, the personal eye, whether a persona or myself or well, it's never really yourself and it's never really a persona. It's usually some kind of weird combination of the two, like what is that term in music? Tartini tones, where there's two, it's with violins or stringed instruments, and you have two tones that you're playing together, and that creates an auditory hallucination of a third tone. It's kind of a psychoacoustic phenomenon. So the individual self is certainly that way, whether it's a persona or whether you're kind of trying to speak from yourself as a narrator. But I figure it's even more that way with collectives. And I became more interested in speaking from the we voice than the personal voice, whether projected or more autobiographical. And I'm thinking that there's going to be like hundreds of microtones in between all the individual voices in a collective. And Milos wrote how difficult it is to remain one person. When I'm thinking about that, energy would be kind of amplified quantumly with a collective, and all the identity questions would be even more intensified, and it's spooky. And I also think about the Greek chorus, and I think about with this poem particularly the fates or the norns, and initiation from innocence to experience on both the child's part that's having the haircut and the people, the entities that are going through this educational process of learning to work with hair, which of course is hair coming from the head. It's like an embodiment or a symbol of thought and consciousness. And all those things kind of work together to intrigue me. And I wanted to play with those tensions and with the microtones between them.
Wow, the idea of the microtone, the idea of as you say that it's so difficult to remain one person, and perhaps even not even desirable
Yeah.
to do so. And I'm thinking about your poem too on the page, which and I see in much of your work, of course, you experiment with long lines, with the interaction between line and sentence, so to speak. Tell us a little bit about how that works for you on the page.
Well, it's really problematic for editors. And sometimes I have to chop it up, but in my heart, it's still always long lines. Like that first poem I sent you that was too many lines for this project. In the book, it's actually going to be shorter lines because it's just but a problem. But I've always loved Whitman. I've always loved going out west and seeing big sky. Here in the South, I love living among mountains, but there's a lot of trees and hills, and so I don't get as much sky. So yeah, I like it when the line overflows the sentence, so to speak, or vice versa.
That
And
overflowing, sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that overflowing seems to also resonate in the idea of many personhoods, and the idea I think, I wonder if I'm not stretching it to ask if the corollary of hair, which is both so personal and at the same time, in some level, not sensate. It's not,
Right,
it doesn't
right.
feel. I wonder if that has any corollary to our idea of breath, which is, of course, both
Wow.
extremely personal, but when it is exhaled, it becomes part of the
Right.
environment around us. And that leads me to ask, you do a lot of performances, and I've had the privilege of watching you perform, and you really bring the room to a new kind of attention. And I'm wondering how you mediate between the page, which is this field, and the voice, which is this uh, uh, temporal um, temporal uh, utility. I don't know what to call it. I'm not doing a good job, but the idea that it's moving in time as opposed to the page, which feels more permanent.
Interesting. I see the page. Well, let me show you my journal. I do it through the journal. This is it's a monster book. And I could probably kill somebody with it. I should keep it like under my pillow instead of a baseball bat or under my bed. But I really like a journal with incredibly like a lot of space.
Wow,
It's
yes.
bigger than me. And to me, actually, my journal is really uncontainable. I've got lines going everywhere. I've got art in there that I do. It's a mess, and it's not linear in any sense. And I actually have trouble like finding things in it. And I've got a big box of journals. So to me, the long line and the huge journal page go together. And I don't always have to write like top to bottom, it's sideways and squiggles and everything like that. And so much as does escape, so much does escape through the breath. I mean, we share our breath with like Genghis Khan and Attila the Hun and Joan of Arc and all those and all the creatures that have ever breathed. And in my journal, I collect quotes and I raise questions and I make mistakes and on purpose and go off topic. And so I feel like for me, at least at this stage of creation, the journal and the breath are very similar, or kind of similar entities, in that they are uncontainable and they're more than the sum of their parts. Now, as far as the page, like the typescript page that ends up in a book, that is different. But I think all those energies are suggested in there. They're kind of implicit by the time they get there. And I write a lot about books and texts and papers with pages with holes in them, like my tiny perforations, and books as alive. I'm working on a prose poem about books that kind of fight back against readers who don't take them seriously. So it's all one kind of living entity to me. But I do tend to write more, I tend to write densely. And so not everything that I write for the page works out if I'm giving a reading, because I think audiences want to be able to, well, it makes sense that they would want to get something on the first hearing because they're only going to hear it one time in a reading. And so if it's like really intensely dense with lots of metaphors and kind of thicknesses, it is harder for readers for listeners to get it and to pick up on it. And so I tend on with readings to read things that are more narrative.
You know, one of the things about this piece that I think is so intriguing, and I think it's a characteristic of so much of your work, for instance, in Coronology, which Etruscan had the privilege of publishing, is that while you could be tempted to read it allegorically, it yields so much more than a particular allegory. In this case, I find myself just drawn to the whole notion of hair and even the recollection of that first haircut, which is terrifying for children. And yet you bring it into some reality where I'm drawn into the idea that this is an actual academy, the Mystique Academy, and I'm going to go there. And I'm wondering how that modality which you use, I think, so beautifully and uniquely, how that plays into the idea of not multiple personalities, but say intimate anonymity.
Interesting. Well, if you think of hair as consciousness and you think of voice, I think Bedart said, no, it was, let's see, Major Jackson in a New York Times review of Frank Bedart said that he works with vocalized performance of consciousness, moral interrogation, and metaphysical speculation. And I think that's what I think I'm working with. And hair itself is individual strand, not even strands, but what is it when it's one thing of hair? Like one, I guess it is one strand, and then clumps, and then it's also one thing. And like you said, it's public and private, and we all have it. So yeah, I'm really playing with embodied consciousness. Does that speak to that at all?
Very much so. I mean, because of course, in your long lines, in the fabric of those lines, which creates a reality that feels absolutely immediate, and yet we all recognize as fanciful. We are moving away from a narrative sense that is dominated and imprisoned by the letter I. And I think that's certainly one of the most enjoyable and unique gifts that you bring to poetry, Claire. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for including me in this project.
And we look forward to your next collection.
Thank you. Thanks so much.